Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. For 7 long years, experts kept telling us Iraq stands at crossroads. Today, optimists point out achievements: brand new constitution, free elections, vibrant media, and the end of Saddam's regime. Pessimists point a finger at Iraq's killing fields, sectarian politics, endemic corruption, and the rising influence of dishonest clerics. But one thing is certain: the country is in a gridlock, and no one knows how to move it forward. The recent election was intended to give the country a fresh start, and yet political bosses are engaged in petty partisan politics. So how do you break this vicious cycle, and what does the future hold for this tormented country? To discuss why Iraq is paralyzed and how the country can be moved forward, I'm joined here in the studio by Robert Fisk, the Middle East correspondent of the British independent newspaper, and by Iraqi political analyst Altikriti, and from Washington by Jack Burkman, a Republican strategist and the founder and president of Burkman Associates. Jack Burkman, what is wrong with this story right now? This Iraqi vehicle is stuck at a crossroads and it's not moving. Definitely it cannot move backwards, but it's not moving forward. What is the reason? Is it the red light? Is it broken? Or is the vehicle itself not functioning?
I don't think there's any, I really don't see any problems at all. I mean, democracy's tough. When you look at where they started and where they are now, I think it's a huge success. I really see no problems at all. I mean, I think what Bush wanted to do was plant some flowers in a troubled region. This region was causing problems for the United States. It was causing problems for the world. And I think Bush said, we have to, win or lose, we have to at least make an attempt to better the region. And I think he won. I mean, Saddam killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. One issue I don't understand is why there is this lingering Arabist and European, almost a hankering for Saddam. They seem to like him and want him back, and I'm confused by a lot of it.
You laid out many points, and we will take them one by one. But for the time being, Robert Fisk, the domino effect that was predicted by Condoleezza Rice as well as Bush, that once Iraq becomes democracy, the rest of the Middle East, we will wake up and we'll find out democracy. That was 7 years ago. Has that happened?
Well, flowers grow very well in graveyards. And I think that, first of all, we never planned what was going to happen after overthrowing Saddam. And then our own morality, which has been outrageous, has always been based on the fact whatever we do in Iraq is okay because it's always going to be better than Saddam was. The fact that we constantly bring up Saddam as being a kind of linchpin of awfulness against which our actions must always be better. Well, they would be, wouldn't they? But I mean, that applies to Hitler too, or anyone else.
What have we done wrong? I'm just curious. You said American...
Well, 1 million dead, 100,000 dead.
Is terrible. What have we done wrong?
I didn't. I said we, actually, Jack. I associated you and I together at that point as the West. America is not the only Western nation.
But how is Western morality bad? What have we done wrong? Tell me what we've done wrong. You said morality is bad.
Oh, I can tell you straight away. We have at the moment more troops per head of population, more Western soldiers in the Muslim world than we did at the time of the Crusades. That's not very good, is it? That's not about democracy. That's about military domination. That's not about democracy. That's the problem. These people in this region, including Iraq, which you say you love so much, or you appear to, they would love our doctors, they would love our academics, they would love our engineering, everything. But it seems to me, given the situation, they don't want our soldiers. And this is something that America will not realize.
Before Jack responds, let me ask Anas a very simple question posed by Jack. What wrong have we done? Go ahead.
Well, I assume from Jack's introduction that he hasn't recently visited Iraq, nor has he walked the streets of Iraq, nor has he visited any towns and cities and villages up and down Iraq, most of which, you know, most of us here couldn't even name, let alone locate on a map. Anyone who had the experience of doing so would find a totally different story to the one reflected by Jack, or at least within the perception of what Jack introduced, and that is that this has been a success. I would like to assume that when he says that this is a success story, that he's talking about America and American interests, which, by the way, even then we could argue that America has been served extremely badly by this escapade. However, if he also meant to say that this success extends to the Iraqi people, then that is not only ludicrous, it's preposterous, and it's extremely offensive to the Iraqi people, as Bob said, hundreds of thousands of whom cannot even be with us today to testify to the fact that whether they like it or not, simply because they have perished as a result of this particular escapade.
Jack, exactly when you mean success, what are you pointing at? Are you saying about the Constitution? Are you talking about the elections? Are you talking about the media? Or simply the collapse of the Saddam's regime? Exactly what is your definition of success?
For the first time in 5,000 years, you have freedom of thought. You have talk radio where people can call in and express their views. Never have you had that before. You know what's going on in Baghdad today? A condo boom. You know who are buying the condos? The French and the Germans and the British. It's amazing. You don't see this stuff reported on the news. You know, I mean, think about it. You're George Bush. It's the aftermath of 9/11. You look at this region. You've got a bunch of I hate to say it, but I mean, you got a bunch of barbarians in the desert. What do you do with this region? You have to take a step to improve the region. You can't just drift on with these brutal
despots. Who are you calling
and
barbarian
dictators.
in the desert, Jack Burkman?
Oh, I mean, let's face it.
No. Who are you referring to? I would like you to point that out.
I am referring to the entire Mideast. The world is doing well. Let me tell you something.
Barbarians?
This world. Sure they are. You got people living in the 6th century, for God's sakes. I mean, most of the Islamic world, I mean, Islam has become this crazy ideology where people are living in the 6th century. I mean, and they want to blame the colonialism. They want to blame the British and the Americans
Jack Burkman,
for everything.
if there was any sympathy before this show started with you, you lost it when you called barbarian in the desert.
You have to understand something. I mean, if you look at George Bush, look at what kind of countries you had. You've got Saddam there. The fact that Saddam was taken out, Bush had to do something to improve the region. You can't just let it drift on.
Can I ask this? Why did he have to do so? I mean, was it out of the kindness of his heart? Was it to rescue these barbarians, as you put it, from their own selves and their own crazed ideology, as you put it? I mean, why on earth do you think that George... I mean, who's the barbarian here, Jack? You have sent your sons and daughters to bombard people's homes, to burn their homes, to obliterate their livings, and they have done nothing to you, yet they are the barbarians in this case. I'm sorry, I beg to differ. I beg to differ.
So what? Okay, so what is your plan for the Mideast now? What would you have done? Just let them drift on with a guy like Saddam? How would you improve this region?
Most of the dictators in this region.
Where would there be hope?
Most of the dictators in this region, many of whom are indeed barbarians, are supported by the United States with funding, with military support, and with political support. Many of these barbarians, who have to live in this bloody region, Jack, have to live with, they are your friends, and that's the problem.
You're right. You're right,
Thank you.
But you have to start somewhere. Some of it's of necessity. You can't do this in the peninsula.
Why not start in Egypt? Why not start in Egypt? Why not Egypt? Why not Jordan?
Because it'd be too.
Why not Syria? Syria, you don't like Syria. Why not Syria?
Syria is inconsequential. If you do it in Egypt or Jordan, there's too much chaos in the region.
You mean Syria doesn't have oil? That's the point, isn't it?
Who gave you the right to launch an illegal war? That's fundamental questions people are going to ask for many decades.
You know, who gave us the right? I mean, okay, look, I'll get even more controversial here. Did George Bush, I'm an eyewitness to history, I can tell you that George Bush, Dick Cheney, and the whole administration, it was never about weapons of mass destruction. They knew that stuff wasn't there. That's a bunch of trumped up nonsense.
So they lied
I'd be
to
the
the
first
American
one to say
people.
it. Now, of course they did. Of course they
lied to the American people.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I can tell you as an eyewitness to history, they lied. And they should have lied. I mean, you know, they needed to do that because they needed to put a large American army in the heart of the Arab world. If that is the case, they lied and they should have lied. Who's the barbarian then? Oh, look at what's happened since you have a big American army in the heart of the Mideast. The Iranians are calmer. Lebanon is calmer. The region is much calmer than it was in 2001.
I live in Lebanon.
It is a better place. It's a far better place.
Just the word to Jack, I mean, if you're in a pit, stop digging. And you are digging even deeper, and you're digging yourself into a problem simply because, I mean, once again, unfortunately, what Jack represents is a constituency within the United States. And I'm more than happy to say that hopefully it's not the majority of the American people. I still harbor a lot of hope for the American people. But Jack represents a constituency which has never been to this particular region. They can't even locate it on a map, yet they see it fit.
I have been to the region.
They see it
times.
fit to issue judgments over who these people are, how they live, how they believe in worship, yet they have no grasp of history, they have no grasp of geography. All they care about is interest. Yet he calls the people in this particular region barbarians, yet he has just said, as he puts it, a witness to history, that his leaders had to lie to the American people to go into an illegal war.
He's right. He's right. The war wouldn't have been politically possible, and had Bush not done that and had sent Colin Powell to the UN to say that, it wouldn't have been possible. But George Bush did what was right for the country and right for the world, and frankly, right for the Mideast. This is the ultimate beneficiaries of this will be the Iraqi people, will be the people of the region who will have a future and who will have a chance. They're locked in darkness.
So let's go. This is the first time I've ever participated in an Al Jazeera comedy show. Look, we're in Iraq. The British were there, of course, and we've run away already, as we will in Afghanistan before Jack's army realizes it. We went to Iraq because of oil. That's the only reason. The reason Jack refers to Syria, which presumably in his view is also laboring in barbaric darkness, is that Syria doesn't have oil.
Yes.
If Iraq's national product had been potatoes or broccoli, the 82nd Airborne wouldn't have gone to Baghdad and Mosul, and that's the fact of the matter.
Well, wait, you're right. See, you're exactly right.
Thanks, Jack.
Well,
that's
you're
great.
Exactly
We're
right.
moving forward,
true,
as they say in Washington.
But you have to hear me out on this. You're right in that's why the U.S. is fundamentally interested in this region. What I'm talking about is, okay, yes, those are American interests, oil in Israel. That's why we're there. We're not there overall for humanitarian reasons. Of course, I concede that. Everybody knows that. But now the question becomes, how tactically do you improve the region? How do you get this region out of darkness?
Jack, I'll tell you how it's been brought out of darkness as far as the people in the region are concerned, although they don't like the sight of the darkness. Iran has won the war. Iran now effectively runs Iraq, and it will continue, because what the war has proved is what we all knew, but Saddam didn't let us talk about, was that Iraq is a Shiite country. And many of the parties involved in government, people like the Dawa Party, who speak directly to the Americans, whom you now love, and because they're anti-barbarian or whatever, the Dawa Party were a major, what you would call, terrorist group in the 80s and 90s, trying to blow up the Emir of Kuwait, blowing up American embassies and so on. Basically, Iran has won the war, and they are extremely grateful to the United States.
And that is the big blunder the United States committed. That's the big blunder your former boss...
But Tehran is very just, and Tehran is very grateful to George Bush.
Indeed, she is, for removing the two dikes, and that is the Taliban and Saddam Hussein.
Presumption. There's a presumption here, and you're saying Iran has won the war. There's a presumption here, and the only way to preserve... Okay, but you have a presumption. We have to lay bare your presumption. Let's explicate it. Your presumption is that the only way to preserve stability is essentially to have a dictatorship in Iraq and a dictatorship in Iran. Democracy is not possible. Don't try. The only way to have stability is to lock this thing down and leave it locked down forever. Now, Bush said, I understand the risk. I understand what can happen here, but I think we should take some long-term risk. I think we should take a chance on planting seeds, and just maybe these flowers can grow.
That is one point of view, Jack Burkman, but the other point of view now by experts, including the American experts, including the current administration of Obama, that this was a grave and colossal blunder committed by George Bush.
I just don't understand grave and colossal blunder. I mean, Saddam, you're talking about a person that killed hundreds of thousands of people with terrible weapons.
The removal of Saddam regime is not a fundamental victory. It is not a big achievement.
I mean, you make it as though the Iraqi people were somehow in love with Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein was the pet of the West. He was armed, he was funded, he was aided by your own government as well as many others for many years, and he was given the same weapon. Hang on, he was given the weapons in order to kill his own people as well as to make the country a threat to its neighbors. So the filthy hand of the West, including your own government, is severely inside Iraq. When you talk about darkness, Jack, it's Iraq since the 9th of April 2003 has been plunged in darkness, and for the past 7 years, any normal Iraqi, you say there's a condo boom. I don't know who these people are who are buying condos in Iraq right now, but I would suggest that the Iraqi people, I would suggest that the Iraqi people till now do not have the luxury of running electricity, and therefore they are currently under the American occupation.
We know how deep it is. Go ahead, Robert.
To Jack. I was banned. I've got a question for you, Jack. I was banned from Iraq because I described the mass rape and killing of Saddam's prisoners by Saddam's men at a prison called Abu Ghraib. On the day I was banned, Donald Rumsfeld went to shake hands with Saddam Hussein to improve relations and reopen the American embassy. Why did he do that?
Well, I mean, to your point, America. I would go so far as to concede that America
Why did Rumsfeld do that? Why did Rumsfeld do that?
You're right. At one point, Saddam was an ally. At one point, we were concerned. We were concerned that there needed to be a buffer against Iran.
Why was he a nice guy back then?
Was he a nice guy back then?
Because our perception at the time was that to preserve balance of power, to hold the line in that region, we needed to be, Saddam needed to be an ally.
The line against Iran,
George
right?
Bush,
The line against Iran.
Look, I'll even take it further.
Who's now won the war?
I'm not arguing that. I concede all of these points. We created, in a lot of ways, the United States created the Ba'athists. In a lot of ways, George Bush himself, Bush's father, was very close to Saddam in the 80s. I mean, it could even be the case, I'll go even further. George Bush, as vice president in the 80s, might have even told Saddam to use chemical weapons against the Iranians.
Wow.
I don't know that for sure, but it might be true.
Well,
and
he provided
you know what?
the components.
At the time,
yes, that's true, for the chemical weapons. Yeah.
At the time, that might have been the smart thing to do.
If that is the case, Jack Burkman, let me go back to your earlier description about the barbarian in the desert. You want to think about that again?
Well, you see, let me flesh that out. If you want to go back, let me explain that comment. I don't retract it, and let me explain it, because if you want to go back to it, I'm going to give you a broad answer.
It's inexplicable.
The world, as a general matter, you got to hear me out. The world is doing well. The Western Hemisphere, Asia, Europe, there are problems, but as a general matter, the world is doing well. What's not doing well is this patch of people living in a region that we describe as the Mideast. A lot of them are locked in this mentality. They think they're living in the 6th century.
I heard that before. Let me pose it to Robert Fisk. Robert Fisk, why can't you just be grateful? Why this region cannot be grateful and wait for the United States, wait for the George Bush lookalike to come and fundamentally reform this area?
Look, I think the basic problem, which we never discuss on this issues, whether it be Iraq, whether it be America, or the Middle East, is that in this area, which Jack says is in barbarous darkness, are millions of people who never lost their faith in God. In the West, with the exception of a few people in Europe, not many, and I know quite a lot in certain parts of America, the West has lost its faith. We are no longer believers in God. We believe in computers, technology, democracy, you name it. And what we have now is this extraordinary situation where people who largely do not believe in God dominate culturally, socially, militarily, people who still do believe in God, whatever Jack may think. And this is an issue which we will not face, we will not deal with. And this is the reason why we, the West, as a military coercive force, must leave the areas which are called Muslim.
Can I add to that, Justin? Can I add to that? Because there are facts on the ground. It's not just from the conceptual point of view. Why is it that we're not waiting or grateful to the savior who comes from westwards to come and save us from ourselves? It's not that. It's the fact that we have facts on the ground. Now, 7 years on from that, beleaguered time of 2003. The Iraqi people are living a life which you and I cannot even begin to imagine in the extent of its misery. Only 2 months ago, the US State Department, where Jack is only a few blocks away from right now, that department issued a report saying that Iraq has become the hub of the Middle East in terms of human trafficking, slavery, child abuse, torture and prostitution. That's his own State Department. This is 7 years on. It's facts on the ground that speak.
Add to that the misery, the poverty, and the collapse of the institutions. So where is the progress, Jack? Where is the meat?
Well, you have to understand, going back to that point, once again, the presumption there, we have to lay it bare. The presumption is that the only way to prevent all this is to lock it down with a dictator. That's what he's saying.
Nobody said
once
that.
you open it up...
Nobody said that.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. What you're saying is, once you open the society up...
What we are saying, Jack, leave the region and leave these countries and leave this government to the people. They deal with it. The Soviet Union, the most evil empire ever created in history, lasted almost 70 years. But Washington did not go and fundamentally change Moscow. It imploded. And that is inevitable. It's going to happen in the Middle East. Countries do change.
The United States could have left the Mideast alone, except one little thing happened on 9/11. These people decided to go into New York City and knock over two buildings.
What's that got to do with Iraq?
And that changed.
What's that got to do with Iraq?
The world.
No, it did not change the world.
It has to do with Iraq, because the U.S. at that point had to take a regional perspective and had to improve the region. We had to get involved.
You just said George Bush lied to the American people about all that.
He did.
Justin,
I want
to put a question.
He was right to do it.
I thought 9/11 would come up. I was crossing the Atlantic on 9/11. Of course, my plane turned round. And I then spent the next few minutes walking around the aircraft with the crew looking for passengers I didn't like. We didn't know where these planes came from at the time. But I'll tell you something. The most depressing thing, I think, was when I heard Bush say, as I knew he would, 9/11 has changed the world forever. I, as a human being, will never allow 19 murderers to change my world. I think that's a gutless thing to do. But Jack let them do it.
The question becomes, that's a very serious thing for the United States. You have to have some kind of response.
So many British people and many Arabs were also killed. And many Jews and people of all faiths and all nationalities were killed in 9/11. Jack, come on. Why did you let them change the world? Why did you let those 19 Arab murderers change your world? Why were you so gutless as to allow those murderers to do that?
Well, it's silly.
No, it's not silly. It's a very serious question, and you're not answering it.
All right. If America's response, I am answering it. America's response to 9/11, if anything, was measured, tempered, judicious. It could have been much worse. It could have been much worse in the Mideast. There were elements in this country that wanted to go in and do some broad destruction in a lot of places, but we didn't.
Can you tell us
George Bush had a very measured, tempered response. There's no question about that.
We'll leave Bush and the judgment of history to history, but in the last 2 minutes left to me, Anas, there is something fundamentally wrong with Iraq. It's not moving forward. What is the reason?
The reason is that basically we created the premise. We eradicated a state that was ruled by a dictator, but it was a state that was being in existence. We eradicated every single shred of that particular state, and we thought that we would end up with a blank canvas and we could just draw the future according to our whims and our dreams. That proved to be a little bit more complicated and complex, simply because the people who were leading the decision, the political as well as the military adventure, were people of the same mentality of Jack, who see these people as barbarians who don't really matter. So what if 100,000 or even 1 million people perish simply because they don't matter? They're barbarians. We've even saved them from themselves. Maybe they're even happier now that they're dead.
I'll take a very short comment from Jack. Has it been worth it for Iraq and for the U.S., Jack?
I mean, America has paid the price in terms of lives and treasure. I don't think there's any question it's worth it for Iraq and for the region, because I think they're headed in the right direction, and I think you had to take a chance. Frankly, even if it results in failure, and I don't think it will, I definitely don't think it will, but even if the experiment results in failure, it was still the right policy choice, because in the first part of this decade, you had to take a chance.
Robert Fisk, the last word. You notice you used the word experiment.
One sentence. I think that Jack would have loved living in ancient Rome.
Because?
I think that he's actually espousing the views of Roman emperors at the moment. This is Rome. And in fact, just behind him, I think the house looks a bit Roman, doesn't it? Even the architecture. I think Jack would have loved Rome.
Robert Fisk, Altikriti, Jack Burkman. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq.
That was fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
To watch the show online, please visit our website, aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, this is Jassim Azzawi wishing you a great week.